Hello, welcome everyone, all of our friends, all of our students and jewelry enthusiasts from all over the world. We are here tonight for our live conversation from l'École, the School of Jewelry Arts, in Paris. Our topic tonight is one that's held very dear to our hearts and also that of our patron, Van Cleef & Arpels, who is also hosting us for this beautiful evening tonight. We're actually in a very historic place, and it's important for us to remember this place, the Place Vendôme. It was very important for the history of high jewelry and also for the history of Paris in general. It was the idea of a powerful minister of Louis XIV, the Sun King. His name was Louvois. There was a competition at the time to create these royal palaces, these royal places to show the power of the king. They asked one of the most important architects of the time, Gilles Mansart, to create unified facades. The idea was to create the facades, which are the same, and the land behind would be sold separately to very wealthy clients who would design their own mansions, their own hôtels particuliers. In the early days, the idea was to have royal institutions as well. But as time went on, the project became more complicated, and the king sort of lost interest, and he sold it to speculators, and they continued to sell the plots of land, leading to a concentration of wealthy aristocrats, art collectors, and of course, it was the jewel box for a giant statue of Louis XIV, 54 feet high, which showed Louis XIV on horseback, just like Julius Caesar. This piece, unfortunately, was destroyed in the Revolution, but in the Empire period, Emperor Napoleon I understood immediately the strong symbolism of the Place Vendôme. As you see now on the Place Vendôme, this column which he erected in 1810, it has a spiral depicting all of his military campaigns. And for those of you who are into ancient art, you'll recognize it was basically inspired by Trajan's column in Rome. Napoleon also topped it with a statue of himself dressed as Caesar. So as you see, the Place Vendôme has always been a concentration of power, symbolism, but we have to really talk about the Ritz. The creation of the Ritz Hotel across the way in 1898, César Ritz, the idea to create each room with its own marble bathroom, bathtub, running water. The Place Vendôme started to attract the sort of wealthy people from all over the world. And this really, in a way, was a huge impetus for the Maison of Jewelry to start settling on the Place Vendôme. Our friends and colleagues Boucheron in 1893 and Van Cleef & Arpels at this very address in 1906. Just a word about this historic boutique. This is actually the center of the history, the beating heart of Van Cleef & Arpels. And this maison was born from a love story, which we'll hear more about a little later. But quite recently, in 2020, this boutique was renovated by a very talented agency, Join Mancoux. They wanted to bring the light of the French savoir-faire. You can see this beautiful stucco work, which is gilt with white gold leaves by hand. This staircase, which is oak stairs, which look as if they're levitating. And this beautiful Murano blown glass chandelier, which is actually from the 2006 renovation, which was celebrating the 100th anniversary of this beautiful maison. So without further ado, it's probably time for us to go join Gislain, my friend and colleague, art historian as well, at the École des Arts Joailliers, and we'll see you upstairs.
Hi everyone, it's a pleasure to be here with you, as Paul said, on Place Vendôme. This place is absolutely related to the topic of today. Tonight is the evening in Paris, but not for everyone. Because when the Maison was born in 1906, it was actually born thanks to two families and a love story. 10 years before, by the late 19th century, Alfred Van Cleef and Estelle Arpels met, fell in love, and by the gathering of these two families, a jewelry house was born. So there's no better way for talking about the world of sentimental jewelry, which will be the topic of tonight. Before we start, a few technical information so you will have all the elements. This talk will last about an hour, and in the end, we'll have a Q&A moment to answer a selection of your questions. On the chat, we have our dear friend and colleague, Einzita Gay-Eckel, who's there to give you additional information, to also send you some links of museums, books, and she will be collecting all the questions you have. Just put them whenever they pop up to your mind, and with Paul, we'll be answering them, as I said, at the very ending. And last but not least, by tomorrow, you will receive a bibliography by email, so you will have information if you want to go further on this very specific topic. So off we go. Let's start on the secrets of sentimental jewels.
Hello.
Hey, hi Paul. We're very lucky to be here tonight. It's raining outside, that's Paris, but we're here in a nice environment, and we're going to talk about love, about sentiments, so this is great. And there's no better way to talk about love without starting by Cupid.
We wanted to show you Cupid, the son of Venus, who we'll talk a lot about tonight. And the idea was to get us in the mood for love, for this idea of sentiment. And Cupid, this is a statue that was ordered by Madame de Pompadour, who was Louis XV's favorite, as we all know. And it was for her palace, which was the Évreux Palace, which is now the Élysée Palace.
Mm-hmm,
and she knew Falconet, and she liked him very much. And she ordered this piece after seeing it in the salon, the French salon. And what's interesting is it's called l'amour menaçant in French, menacing love. And why is that? Well, Cupid he's sort of secretly telling us, be quiet. And at the same time, he's reaching into his quiver for an arrow, because he's about to shoot an innocent person and make them fall in love. And he's asking us to stay quiet.
He's keeping secrets, and that's these specific secrets we're going to talk about tonight. These sentimental jewels, we decided to talk about them in 3 moments. We're going to start with the great mythology of love, with the legendary lovers and the legends around them. Then we'll move on to flowers. It was the topic with Einzita we mentioned 2 months ago, but we're going to pick up a few flowers in this garden of love that are related to the world of sentiment. And we're going to end with a secret language of love, to go deeper in this very specific, sometimes hidden language, complex to identify if you were not one of the lovers, owner of the objects. So let's start with our first moments, and we're going to start with the Greco-Roman mythology, because most of the Western culture is based on these Greek and Roman civilizations, and in particular, in the legends, in the stories, in the history, you have this mythology from the ancient times. Here you can see a close-up of a painting by Paolo Veronese, the Venetian painter of the Italian Renaissance, that represents Venus. She is half naked, preparing her headdress, as you can see, beautiful Venetian blonde color of the hair, putting some jewels in it, and she is holding a mirror with the help of her son, Cupid, whom we have seen just right before, and you can see her reflection in the mirror, and it looks like the reflection is standing at us. So there's sort of a connection that you can see from the picture to us. What is interesting, and there's something we're going to see, is that from this couple, this duo, I should say, mother and son, Cupid and his mother Venus, we're going to have a lot of symbol that will be very recurrent even today, even present in some of the objects related to love that we can know, that we will know very soon on Valentine's Day, to be exact. So if you look at some minerals, we're going to see some crystals. One is rough on the left, the other one is cabochon cut on the right, but they have these sort of rutilated elements in them. What's interesting is that they immediately connect with the hair of Venus. You can see the name itself, the nickname we gave to this mineral, to this gem, is actually to be Venus hair. So we gave the name of these elements within the rock, I would say, to understand in a better way the connection with mythology. Some other nicknames were given to these rutilated elements. They actually were said to be the arrows of Cupid. So these two people will be very present in most of the elements we're going to study together. And if you get closer to the painting again, we've seen the top of it. Let's go to the bottom of it. And you can see below the bed, next to the feet of Venus, there's a couple of doves. And these doves are related to the world of Venus. They were holding the chariot of Venus in the mythology, and they were kissing. When they go together, it's for life. So it's a symbol of fidelity, which is very important. And this is something that will be very present also in some of the jewels of the time. Here, once again, we put a painting in the middle, which you can see Venus again receiving a kiss from her son, Cupid, with the little wings, the little baby with the wings that we know from Valentine's Day, and the two doves together representing this union, this sort of holy union of the lovers. And on both sides, you will see there is a couple of doves kissing. Let's get closer to the picture on the left. With the red eyes, you will see they are kissing. They are in their nest with some laurel leaves, symbol of the victory of their love, for sure. And at the top, there's a bow, sort of a way to fix, to maintain, to catch it forever, in a way, and prove the importance of their love in such object from the middle of the 18th century. So it proves how important were the object to materialize the sentiment of one's person. This piece has been a gift for an engagement. So it proves also that the relation with the marriage also was important in these objects. These doves that you see on the painting were also present much later in the Art Nouveau style, about 1900, with the two doves kissing. And that's interesting to see that if the style evolved with time, with the taste, the thematic, the topic itself is the same. And this is something which is important. Birds kissing will be an importance of fidelity. And here we can present these doves, but we actually are very lucky to have in front of us another piece. This is right in the middle. These are not doves, of course, no worries. These are penguins. These penguins, I've read recently in information on National Geographic that the male penguin will give a stone to the female, and this would represent they will be in couple forever. So fidelity, once again, this will be a key symbol of their love forever, and this is part of a collection of Van Cleef & Arpels produced in a collection called the Noah's Ark, because it was part of these couples of animals that survived after the Diluvio. And what's interesting in this high jewelry piece, the beauty of the curves of this black onyx gemstone, some of the diamonds, and you can see this cabochon of lapis lazuli for the darker blue, and the lighter blue is turquoise, of course, and one beak is different than the other penguin. One is turquoise, the other is lapis lazuli. And what's nice in it is really the cuddling attitude which is there, the way of hugging, the way of being together, in a way embracing in a large way, which is something very important, because being close to each other, embracing the one you love, cuddling is something, because of the context today, we cannot do a lot. And I think it was nice to start with some nice feeling, nice emotions on such piece.
And like doves, they stay together their entire lives, don't they?
Absolutely,
Penguins.
absolutely.
Caring for the young. When one goes to search for the food, the other comes back. So it's a very nice comparison, actually.
Definitely, definitely. So let's move on from Venus and her universe to Cupid.
What can we say about Cupid? We saw Cupid in the beginning. We saw our menacing love who was taking us into his world and saying, don't tell, I'm about to make somebody fall in love. Gislain mentioned that Cupid, yes, the son of Venus, he has been with us since antiquity. He was on intaglios, doing all kinds of different mischief, and he became very popular again in the Renaissance. And here we take you to the 17th century. Cupid had a huge popularity yet again. And this was due to a very specific reason. There were many reasons, but there were people who published books of emblems. There was Otto van Veen. He was a Dutch, Flemish artist who created a book of emblems, Amoratum Emblemata. And he had 124 different emblems, with Cupid watering the myrtle flowers for his mother, Cupid chasing a butterfly, we'll learn why later, Cupid up to a lot of mischief. And the most popular of these emblems is the one you see here, was Cupid shooting his arrow. And on the left, we have this very, very moving little piece. It's actually from the second part of the 17th century. It's just in embossed silver. It's what we would call a trinket. But what's important here, it belonged to a young English girl, Martha Edlin. We know that because it was conserved in her family for 300 years in a little box that she made and she embroidered herself. Now, you notice Cupid, he's looking at us with his knowing gaze, and he's about to shoot somebody. But look on the edges, there's a love saying, which is a huge aspect of sentimental jewels. No heart truer to you than mine. And this is actually to show you that a piece of sentimental jewelry doesn't have to be intrinsically expensive. And this is actually a locket. So perhaps this young woman put hair in there, or she put a memento of a loved one. So these became very popular during the marriage of, I read that Charles II and Catherine of Braganza, these little lockets, inexpensive, that people started to use more ubiquitously in London. So then I wanted to tell you about this piece on the right, a little more, let's say, luxurious, but not much. You have some pearls, you have turquoises set in silver, and we have a rock crystal, which is carved on the top. But look behind, inside. We have, perhaps Martha Edlin or some other young girl needleworked this. It's basically homemade needlework. And one of the other popular poses of Cupid is when he's kneeling to shoot. There's so many love symbols in this jewel. He's kneeling, he's about to shoot an arrow at a flaming heart, which is on an altar. So I think we got the point. And this piece is actually also very interesting because it's a slide. It's a piece with two bales on the back, so it's beautifully enameled on the back, and ladies could wear it on a ribbon, so they could wear it on their neck, or they could wear it on their wrists. We weren't yet in the age of the brooch and the pin as we know it today. Now we go from figurative, literally seeing Cupid. Here, this idea of the arrow in people's minds and people's hearts. They knew right away when they saw the arrow that we're talking about Cupid. So we selected this much more sumptuous piece on the left. It's actually a pendant locket as well. It's from Prague in the early 17th century, probably made in the workshops of the Habsburgs. And it's much more sumptuous in its use of gems. We're seeing an evolution. Not that the other piece was in a different category, but we have rubies, sumptuous rubies set in gold. We have table-cut diamonds. We have this sort of polished, non-cut ruby in the middle. And the setting, the gold setting around the ruby is what accentuates the heart shape. And let's not forget the arrows, which are piercing the heart with point-cut diamonds. So here, I think the message is quite clear. There's a miniature portrait of somebody inside who meant a lot to somebody. And then we have another arrow on the right. This arrow is interesting because it's quite modern if you think about it. Ladies would wear these in their hair. You see ladies with these hairpins with jewels in their hair all the way through the 19th century. And this piece actually used to be longer. It was a hairpin. It was probably modified in the 18th century. But the interesting thing for us is that right away it's an arrow, and with these it's set with emeralds and with rose-cut diamonds. So we're seeing that this idea. This is later. This is in the 18th century. The use of gemstones is becoming a little more sophisticated, and the piece is. It's interesting as well as Gislain points out. The garnets on the end are red. So is he implying that it's the blood of someone who was actually, the victim of Cupid's golden arrows? So again, this idea of the arrow, the heart in the arrow, we're going to see it's a universal symbol.
And sometimes, and this is one legend that matters, Cupid was his own victim. He never managed to organize this reality, but the god of love could fall in love for someone. And this is the story of love and Psyche. In a few words, to make the long story short, Psyche was the most beautiful woman on earth according to the Greek legends. The big problem is that her parents received most of gifts of people that not just wanted to marry her, but also to worship her as if she was the goddess of love. Venus, the actual goddess of love, was jealous. So she will send Cupid, her son, to punish this young mortal and make sure she would marry an ugly creature. That's a terrible revenge for the goddess of beauty and love. But the thing she never thought is that her own son will fall in love with this mortal. And this is exactly what happened. So Cupid tried to protect Psyche. And what he did was to tell the parents to go to the mountain, to go to the temple, to know what to do to save their daughter. And in the temple, he spoke, like in God's voice, and he said, you have to abandon your daughter, and a creature will take her. The parents executed, which is quite terrible in the story. Some of the fairy tales are horrible for that. And he, with the help of the wind, invisible, took the young Psyche and took her to the palace where he was supposed to live. This is exactly what you see in the painting, which is on the right-hand side by François Gérard. You can see in her eyes that she cannot see him. He is invisible. He's not really touching her. He's just coming to her, starting to embrace her. He's going to kiss her or something, but she only feels him. She cannot see a god because of his power. But above the head of Psyche, there's a butterfly. The butterfly is the symbol of Psyche. The word Psyche in Greek means butterfly. It's also the first name of this woman, but it also means the soul. And it is the power of love over the soul which is present in such representation. And this is why in jewels as this one, you can see how love flies in a way with the wings of this butterfly. This is this sort of power of the wind taking with love the young Psyche to the palace of the god of love, to the palace of Cupid. So what will happen there?
Well, our story of Psyche continues. She's in her palace. She's been living a very happy life, and she's joined by her lover every night, and she's very happy, but she's a little bit concerned because he said the one condition is she cannot see his face. In the meantime, Psyche's sisters find her. They're jealous and they want to see where their sister is, and they convince her to look at him. So one night, she goes into the room where they have just been together. She lights him with an oil lamp, and she's so startled by his beauty that a drop of oil drops on Cupid, and he's awakened and startled, and he's so angry at her deception of having looked at him that he flies away. This is a beautiful painting by painter Clément Belle, who's a French painter who became a great designer for the Gobelin workshop in France. But the painting shows us this moment, this very sensual moment, and we wanted to show you these wings sort of remind us of his flight, of Psyche's flight away in anger and shock. And this first pair of wings, they're jewels, they're brooches, and they are actually, they're very naturalistic, but at the same time, around 1900, wing jewelry became quite popular. It was the period of Art Nouveau, as Gislain mentioned, where nature became one of the major preoccupations, and also the use of this transparent enamel, which in English we use the French expression pique à jour. So these beautifully naturalistic feathers, which are with transparent enamel, they're brilliant cut diamonds, beautifully, they give us this sensation of movement. And the other set is very interesting as well, a little more luxurious. We're in platinum, enamel, and diamonds. And these pieces were ordered from Chaumet, a jeweler on the Place Vendôme, and from a very wealthy American lady, Gertrude Payne Whitney. She was actually from the Vanderbilt family. And the Whitney family, they were two very large American fortunes. And her husband ordered these for her. They're brooches, which she could also wear as a diadem. So you see, this is the period I spoke to you a little bit about the Place Vendôme earlier. Wealthy American clients start coming to Paris to start to purchase these beautiful jewels, and they like to also pretend sometimes that they're princesses, so it's also a diadem. So this piece is from 1910, and it actually belongs, it's in the heritage of Chaumet. So again, these wings, we selected these pieces because we liked the way they show flight and Cupid's flight. So our poor Psyche, she goes to Venus to beg her help, and Venus, rather than help her, she whips her and beats her very badly. And she sends her on a very difficult journey, doesn't she?
Yes.
She gives her
terrible
tasks,
labors.
labors. She gives her very difficult labors. And her first labor, she has to actually separate a huge mound of different types of seeds, wheat, whey, different things. And of course, it's an impossible task, except for an army of ants comes to help her. Her other task is to collect the wool from very dangerous rams or sheep who kill human beings. So what happens is a reed in the river tells her, wait until the rams fall asleep, and you collect the wool from the bushes that they've rubbed against. And her third travail, she actually has to go to the river Styx, which is the river between the underworld and our world, which is fiery, it's infested with dragons. And of course, she's doomed to fail, except for Zeus comes in the form of an eagle to help her. And for her fourth travail, she's sent to the underworld, to Proserpina.
And she must come back from the goddess of hell with the secret of beauty in a vase that the goddess of hell would provide her, but with the mention never to open the vase. You know, the curiosity of all mortals, she would open the vase in the underworld and will faint. But no worries, there's a happy ending because Cupid will fly to her and kiss her. It looks like the story of Sleeping Beauty and Prince Charming, but this is another story from the ancient times, and this is what Canova, in this beautiful sculpture preserved in the Louvre Museum, represents. And it proves the importance of such story in sculpture, but also in some illustrations, as you will see with the cameo next to it. This beautiful cameo by Tommaso Saolini, a great glyptician at the time, would represent the happy ending of the story. The flying Cupid, that you can easily recognize as a teenager, naked with the wings, and Psyche, the young woman with him, you can identify that it's Psyche because she is in love with him. Then to make sure that you can identify her, you have some butterfly wings on her back. So remember the name Psyche, which means butterfly. And to really make sure you will not get confused, you have another butterfly she holds. And that would represent a key symbol, of course, of her identity, but also of love. And this leads us to the second part of our tray, which is there, because butterflies are very frequent as symbols of love, as you will see. We're very lucky to be in here because we have this between the finger ring, which is there, that will represent with yellow sapphires and colorless diamonds, these two butterflies flying around each other like two members of a couple that will always be together. And this sort of legend exists from the ancient Greece, but also in ancient Asia, China, Japan. The same love stories did exist, and you also can find it as a single butterfly. I mean, single. You might be married, but we don't know the secret of this person, with mother of pearl, which is there, and which becomes something very recurrent in the history of the Maison. And this leads us to why butterflies were so important at Van Cleef & Arpels.
This, as we mentioned earlier, the Maison Van Cleef & Arpels was really started in 1906. It was really the full bloom of Art Nouveau. Art Nouveau was the idea of creating jewels, the three Fs, femininity, flora, fauna. And although the Maison never really did pure Art Nouveau, as we've seen with those pieces that we showed you earlier, they actually were very inspired by butterflies, by nature. This idea of transformation, butterflies are they transform, right, from the caterpillar.
The caterpillar. Yeah, I was looking for the
So
word.
we see this since the beginning of the history of the Maison. In the middle, we show you this. We call these a pancarte. It's a retail card. It's about so big. It's even not almost the actual size. And these are cards which the workshops create. And there's a very detailed rendering on the front. And you also have the stones that will be used. You have the serial number of the piece, etc. These are extremely rare and valuable documents which belong to the patrimony department. And so around our pancarte, we wanted to show you all the myriad of different types of butterflies. We were fortunate to see in real life a couple of butterflies. But you can see you have the butterfly on the bottom left is what we call a swallowtail with these beautifully set violet sapphires, mandarin garnets, and opal. The body's made with onyx, and it's all open work. As you can see, the diamonds, it's as if it's floating. These diaphanous creatures are such a popular theme, aren't they, in Van Cleef & Arpels and elsewhere. But I always think of butterflies when I think of the creations of Van Cleef. Here you have another piece which is from the 2000s, as was the other. The other piece was 2015. And here you have this butterfly in white gold, rubies and diamonds, this time in a profile, a more sort of naturalistic pose.
It looks like a flower.
It looks like a flower,
also.
yeah, you really have to look carefully. So this idea of the butterfly, which is traversed from this Psyche, the idea of Psyche, all the way into the Place Vendôme, really.
And the symbolic will move from butterflies to moth.
Yes, the moth it's obviously similar. I think in the ancient world they considered the moth was very similar in the sense that it represented the soul. It's still a fluttering being. And we started with this piece on the left, which is by a Castellani. They were an Italian family who really, for me, are at the heart of the archaeological school of jewelry. In Italy, they had restored an important collection of Etruscan jewelry twice in their career. They were father and son team. There were two sons and the father. And they became aware of these techniques, the gold working techniques of ancient Italy, also ancient Greece. And they started to imitate some of these ancient jewels. They experimented with what we call granulation, these tiny little pearls of gold. And in this piece, this is a period they had opened a micro-mosaic workshop. Micro-mosaics were a specialty in Naples and in Rome. And it's as the word implies, they're tiny little pieces of glass which are cut from rods of glass. And they're arranged to create a motif, and they're covered with wax to fill in the gaps, and they're polished. It's painstaking work, and this brooch is a lot smaller than it looks in the image. And it's important to us because it's written in Greek, psyche, which is the soul. So for the Castellanis, they were still sticking to this ancient Greek idea of the soul of the butterfly in a very well executed piece. And we wanted to show you this very simple jewel from the 1880s in England. And I think we all know the expression like a moth to the flame. In Shakespeare's Merchant of Venice, Portia says, does the candle singe the moth?" because she's feeling that all these suitors are coming to her. She's a very beautiful lady. So this idea, it's even spoken about in the Quran. The Prophet is one of his lessons. This passion, if you let your passion get too strong, it will lead to your demise. And this very simple piece with gold, silver, and a diamond, and that was created in Britain, it sort of really encapsulates this idea of attraction that you cannot control.
Absolutely, and some doom that will be in the end, because that's the reality sometimes. And love can hurt. That's the feeling which is expressed in some illustrations. The representation of bees means this perfectly. What you see in the middle is a design, a project made by Hans Holbein, the great painter of the 16th century, who worked for Henry VIII, King of England in particular. This was a project for a hat badge. This design, we don't know if it has been produced for real or if it just stayed a design, but it's very interesting. I would love to see it for real if it exists as a piece of jewelry. But what we know in the design is that all the decoration tells a story. The story of baby Cupid, as you can see, blind, because love is blind, who is trying to get some honey. So we all know that when we have a dear someone, we all call him or her honey. So that's the meaning of this sensual delicacy, sort of sugar representation. But the bees will be protecting, of course, stinging poor Cupid. And the message which is around is, in Latin, nocet empta dolore volupta. I can translate it like no pain, no gain, which means you really have to get hurt if you want something, but you will have to feel, to experiment the feeling. And you see it in some objects that are not obviously precious. Remember, sentimental jewelry is not expensive, obviously. It could be very popular, very easy to have. Here is like a message that you can read with the bee, "Be my honey." Again, we play with the word honey, with the word bee, of course, as a symbol of love. And here, this is another Chaumet piece that represents a bee with the heart. It was from a collection in the early 2000s called attrape-moi si tu m'aimes, catch me if you love me, and the bee was used on purpose. So you see how some specific animals, specific fauna illustration would reflect the world of love. Let's move on to our second chapter and talk about the Garden of Love. In many legends, we have to keep in mind, think about King Arthur, I should say Lancelot and Guinevere, thank you. I was saying Juliet. No, Romeo and Juliet, Tristan and Isolde. So all these love stories, at some point, they will be in a protected garden, a closed garden to be just between them, protected. And this is what you see in here, in the decoration that was used on another building next to here, a private residence, an hôtel particulier from the 18th century called the Hôtel d'Evreux. When they launched in 2019 the Romeo and Juliet collection, Van Cleef & Arpels recreated the Italian garden look. And you see a clip called Romeo giving a bouquet of flower, or a flower, to Juliet. And that's the symbol of passing on your love, giving your love, and materializing forever with the gemstones into a piece of jewelry. So let's take out of this garden some of the key flowers of the world of sentiment. And we'll start with roses.
Roses are such a large topic. Red roses, of course, passion. Yellow roses, more hidden. I think in France you have very coded messages about the color.
Never give a red rose,
yellow.
yellow.
A white rose is purity. But we decided to focus on this story of the romance of the rose, this 13th century sort of dream sequences by two different authors, Guillaume de Loris and Jean de Meun, and 17,000 of lines, octosyllabic. He talks about love in a metaphorical way, and he calls the main protagonist in the story, he refers to his beloved as the rose, but he's also metaphorically speaking about female sexuality. It was quite risque for the time. It's in this whole idea. It was hidden, of course, these messages. He spends the entire story is this gentleman trying to attain the garden again, this hortus clausus, this closed garden, who is his love. And this is one of the most spectacular manuscripts. By the way, this was a bestseller for 2 centuries.
Yes, definitely.
And there are still 300 manuscripts that exist, which means there were probably quite many more.
Yes.
And this one is from Bruges. It's by a master of the Holy Book. And you can see the lover is actually sleeping. And then he's coming out, getting dressed. He's going outside in his courtly costume. And in the back right, you see him going into the garden. So this whole story revolves around him attempting to actually access the garden and his loved lady. It became so popular that even through the Middle Ages and the early Renaissance, the rose, people immediately thought of the romance of the rose. Now, moving on to a different romance, again, our star-crossed lovers, as we say, Romeo and Juliet. This piece is called The Italian Rose. And it was created in the same collection, the Van Cleef & Arpels Romeo and Juliet. Juliet, there's a scene on the balcony. She has a monologue. I think it's before the same moment as the balcony scene. And she said, "What's in a name? A rose that is not called a rose still smells as sweet." So this idea that because she's a Capulet and he's a Montague, because he's called Montague shouldn't matter. Their love is what matters. And the Maison wanted to present this piece, a spectacular piece. There's 2 roses, the one on the left with diamonds, which represents the purity of Juliet and her love, and the one on the right, which is Romeo, the rose that he leaves her before taking absence from her. And it's actually, these stones are navette cut, what we call mystery set, which is a technique developed and patented since 1933 by Van Cleef & Arpels. And if you want more information about mystery set, you can come see us at l'École, and we'll take a lot more time to explain. It's a very painstaking and technical process, and the lapidary has to prepare each stone separately and cut little ridges and fit it into a gold structure. And another aspect of this piece, other than its beauty, it's transformable. This is one of the themes since the 20s, actually, in Van Cleef & Arpels. The jewels are transformable. The flower, the rose can be detached, the red rose. It could be worn as a necklace and also as a brooch. So again, this love, we go from this romance of the Middle Ages to a romance of the Renaissance.
Absolutely. And we'll move from the roses to the daisies. We'll just have a selection of few flowers that matter in the language of love. The daisy, we might all have played this game when we were kids, that you take off the petal and the game is he or she loves me or not. Well, in French, I have to be honest with you, that it's a little more complex, as you can see on the left, brooch by Eugène Grasset for Weber, a great maison of jewelry that disappeared, but very present in the Art Nouveau. And it represents how we play the game. It's not yes or no. It's a little more complex. We'll make sure have better yes than no. And you can read in French un peu, so it's a yes, a little. Then beaucoup, yes, a lot. You can read passion or passionately, so yes, with passion. And then pas du tout, which means not at all. So you have more chances of a yes than for a no.
Very optimistic.
Very well. Is it better to have a little than not at all? I'm not sure, but that's part of the reality. Then you have a beautiful daisy that was part of the gift for the wedding of Prince Rainier of Monaco and Grace Kelly, who would become Princess Grace of Monaco afterwards. This piece with the blue of the sapphires and the beauty of the white is also very present, this mix of color in many engagement rings, and we can easily imagine that if we have to take off all the petals, the answer of Grace to Rainier will be yes, of course, and forever. So that's part of the love story, and I think the daisy represents very much this answer to the question, do you love me?
Let's talk about ivy. We talked about ivy in the Flora lecture in the context of the Romantic period of the 19th century. But if you really look back in time, ivy became a symbol of the heart way back in antiquity. For the ancient Egyptians, ivy represents Osiris, eternal life. And in ancient Greek diadems from the 3rd, 4th century before Common Era, one in Thessaloniki, for example, you see ivy leaves which start to look like stylized hearts, the heart that we see today. So we wanted to make this link with the feelings of the heart for the world of antiquity. It was the actual where your feelings and your knowledge and, of course, your love was. And we wanted to show you this piece by Boucheron, and it's actually called Ivy of Paris. It's a recent piece from 2010s. And Frédéric Boucheron had set up originally in the Palais Royal. In the Palais Royal, if you've been there, it's in arcades. It's not a big open street, and there's pavements on the ground. And he was impressed with the ivy that was growing. So he created ivy early on in the history of the Maison, way before now. And of course, they've gone back into the archives. And this beautifully executed piece, the pavements of the ground are executed in gray and different color diamonds. And of course, the ivy leaves are very, almost like icicles are growing on them. It's a very romantic piece, and we like to think that it's referring to this reference to the heart. And on the right, we selected this, again, we're back to Falconet, the great sculptor and friend of Madame de Pompadour. Madame de Pompadour, as we all know, she was Louis XV's favorite. They met at the mass ball for his son's wedding, and within a few months, he had moved her into Versailles on the first floor of the main building. He had purchased the Domaine de Pompadour to make her a marquise. She had a huge social ascent. And by 1750, their love affair was sort of over, the sensual part, but she was a friend, and she wanted to make clear to the public that they were now friends and that they would stay together in a different way. And she had commissioned from a colleague of Falconet, Pigalle, it's Madame de Pompadour as a goddess of friendship. And Falconet did his own version for the Sèvres manufactory, which is, she actually convinced Louis XV to become a patron and to purchase. It was quite expensive to make porcelain. It was a scientific feat. And this is biscuit, which is porcelain, where they don't put the enamel for the final firing. Why? Because they wanted it to look like marble, and it was easier for sculptors to work. So you're probably wondering why we chose this piece. The title of the piece is The Heart in the Hand of Friendship. So she's presented as holding a heart in the right hand, which is from the Book of Ripa, this book that we all know from art history. And she's leaning against a post, which shows her fidelity and her strength. And the reason why we chose is not only because we love this piece, but if you look, there's actually an ivy leaf amongst all of these roses. Roses, of course, can represent passion, but they can also represent friendship, and this little ivy leaf. So again, this love story of Madame de Pompadour and Louis XV, we thought it fit quite nicely in with our theme of sentimental tokens and jewelry tonight.
Absolutely. And let's move on to a flower that works very well with the English language, because in French we say myosotis, which is just the name of the flower. In English we say forget-me-not. And that is precisely this idea of a flower that will be a symbol of remembrance, a symbol that you will never forget someone you love. You have a very contemporary piece on the right-hand side. It's a watch for Van Cleef & Arpels, when you have a variety of very colorful reality of this flower, but the color we all know is the turquoise color, which is the one you see on the left. And this representation of the little flower with the petals in turquoise, with the hands, was very frequent in the 19th century. The late Georgian and the whole Victorian period was full of these symbols and will always be the symbol of being part of someone's life and never be forgotten.
Pansies. This one actually works better in French. Penser. The root of the word for pansies is penser, which means to think, to reflect in French. From the Latin, we think the etymology is from 15th century, pensare, so to reflect. And it also is a way of showing one's love in a very subtle way. In Victorian England, it was not permitted to show passion, to show all of these feelings. So men would give ladies for whom they had feelings, they would give them pansies. And there was a particular way in which they did this. They would create a bouquet called a tussie-mussy. And it was a bunch of herbs in the middle. Hidden in the middle were pansies, surrounded by sort of a napkin. And it was a way of telling a lady, I have feelings for you, I miss you, I want to see you, which was socially acceptable. And so through time, the pansy has remained, and still is today, this idea that I'm thinking of you. And we have on the left this, it's a little locket, a little pendant with a picture frame, and the ground is with enameled pansies. And of course, somebody was probably thinking of this woman, telling this woman that he remembers her and is thinking of her. And on the right, we have this watch with beautiful guilloche enamel, which really, this is the Chaumet, from 1910 created this watch. But they had really mastered these enameling techniques since way before in the 1830s and 40s.
So there's no better way to conclude the reality of this secret garden with a garden, a real one, which is there, I mean, in jewels for sure, but you can see the couple. It's a beautiful couple covered with enameling for the color. You can see that there's some branches from a tree, and there's some ornaments of the leaves at the very top to protect them, to cover them, to make sure they are together in this secret area. Pearls are around, symbol of purity, the purity of their love. The red gemstone, ruby, probably will be a symbol of the passionate reality of the love, and the diamond will prove it will last forever, as the diamond will mean to be eternal. So all the symbols are here very present in this medieval object, which makes valuable always these symbols of love that will be recurrent in most of the periods. But we're going to go deeper, further, in more complex elements, and we're going to talk about, again, our heart.
Yes, we'd like to tell you, some of these jewels are quite obvious in their messages and others less so. So we'll start with the more obvious, the heart. We talked about the evolution of the heart from Antiquity, the leaf, the ivy leaf, the stylized heart. There's one heart that all of us, when we see, we automatically see that it's Tiffany. Tiffany, Charles Louis Tiffany, brilliantly played on this idea that Queen Victoria had made charm bracelets extremely popular. And Tiffany decided, I read that it was around 1889, and that they started to do this single heart on a charm bracelet. So this one was from the 2000s, so the enduring charm of this charm is still sort of the image of Tiffany to this day. And on the right, we show you a much more exuberant example. It's literally a puffy heart. It's by Paul Flatteau, who was one of the first of these sort of jewelers to the stars. He started in New York and as a medical student and left Columbia to become a jeweler, and became quite famous and moved to Hollywood, where he made jewels for Greta Garbo, for Marlene Dietrich. And this particular piece he made for Millicent Rogers. She was the granddaughter of the Standard Oil fortune. And she was quite a talented jewelry designer in her own right, and she gave him the idea for this puffy heart. She had given some sketches. And Fleto, what he made for her is this, quite humorous actually, very bright, rubies and enamel beads on the heart. You have calibrated sapphires, and this message, verbum caro, which is a little mysterious, but it pretty much alludes to the fact that a word from my loved one, or to my loved one. Millicent Rogers was quite a very chic lady. She spent her life looking for beauty, and she also had a very fragile health. So it's ironic, she ended up dying of a heart attack, and she probably, I think she knew she had problems with her heart. She had several heart attacks in her life, but it's beautiful that she loved this jewel. She wore it often, and we see it in photos in Vogue and other places.
And we'll keep in mind that it's a loved heart, which is there.
It's the
pierced,
heart with
yeah,
the pierce. Thank
the
you
arrow
very much.
in it.
The
for
arrow,
sure.
Cupid's arrow, piercing the heart.
What's interesting is that we all know that the shape of this precise heart is a symbolic one. The organ in our body is not of that shape. However, what's interesting is to see that some jewelers decided to create heart jewels with the exact anatomical representation of it. And this is precisely what Mellerio produced in the late 1800s, that represents the heart as a realistic anatomical illustration, but with the flame at the top, which is a symbol, the symbol of the burning love that would, we hope, last forever. And this design represents that the scientific research, in a way, and the anatomical study were also part of the inspiration that the jeweler could get. In a more contemporary way, I would say, on the right-hand side, you will see it's an anatomical heart once again. It's a man's jewelry, and it's interesting that many of these hearts exist. You can find them on the internet. What's interesting to see is that it's like if for a man it would be more masculine to have an anatomical heart rather than the symbolic heart shape that we all have on Valentine's Day, which would be considered more feminine. It's interesting to see how the approach of the shape of the heart could be different in the act of wearing a jewel. And that means a lot in a way. And we're going to get deeper and deeper in more complex symbols.
So hair jewelry is nothing it's nothing new. It's existed probably for centuries. Mm-hmm. But the idea of giving a lock of hair to a loved one, it's usually a component of sentimental jewels and objects. The hair lasts for a long time, and people would give each other lockets. They would give each other rings with hair. And here on the right, we wanted to show you this beautiful actual bracelet. It's in the Museum of Decorative Arts in Paris. And yes, it's made of hair. There are locks of somebody's hair behind that beautiful monogram. And the bracelet itself is braided hair. This is in the Second Empire period in France with the Empress Eugénie, who was going to balls. And this type of jewel, although it might shock us, was worn. Mm-hmm. And this piece is particularly luxurious. It's in gold, chased gold with some neo-Renaissance and other motifs, which are typical of the eclecticism of the Second Empire. And hair, of course, all different types. It became a cottage industry, really. In Victorian England, mm-hmm. young women were encouraged to braid hair. They made their own little tool to create these pieces, a huge trend. And sometimes, I know in our Asian audiences, sometimes they're a little surprised mm-hmm. about the idea of the hair, but the hair remains ever present in this idea. It's actually giving a part of oneself, isn't it? And we're moving straight into the 21st century. We wanted to show you this piece because it also represents giving a part of yourself, this time a thumbprint. So you have jewelers, you can, on the internet and elsewhere, you send in your thumbprint and they incorporate it into a jewel. And in this particular case, we're back to our heart shape. And the thumbprint would be the person presumably giving the piece, so I, and then the heart would be love and you. So giving a part of oneself is still today valid in terms of sentimental jewelry, isn't it?
And these inscriptions were very important because love messages could be sent also with these rebus and complex representations. Here you have a selection of some of the pieces we have found, because there were many from many periods that we discovered, some in French, some in English. The first one is a beautiful enamel pendant in French. French and English are the most common languages used for love messages in jewelry. It is written, "Je vous couvre de 1000 baisers," which means I cover you with 1,000 kisses. Very intimate in a way. It is, yeah. It's a nice way to really get closer to someone, I can imagine. We're in the early 20th century, and it proves also the power of this message at the time. The second one is a proper rebus, so you know how to decipher it. You need to understand and read properly the letters themselves as words or the images as words. So let's do it together. From the top, may. Then you can see there's an I, so I, see you, may I see you. Then there's a house, which means home, my dear, may I see you home, my dear. These sort of messages, rebuses, were very popular in the Victorian era, the second half of the 19th century. Here we are in the early 20th century, 1915, so it proves how popular it would remain after the period, and it makes it also very valuable because it was the context of the war. And last but not least, this is from the late 1700s. This is from France. It's a little more libertine, I would say, as the French would be. Yes, definitely. There are some letters on the other side. It's a ring, so you cannot read all the elements, but I will translate it for you. It's written in the middle L, so she. And then there's an A on the other side, C and D, elle a cédé, which means in French, she succumbed. In proper words, she opened her bed to someone. It has something very, very sexual in a way also, but it proves also that love will go to the most intimate part of the secrets, which is present in some of the jewels.
Another type of coded love message are acrostic jewels. Acrostic jewels have their origins. Napoleon I would order bracelets, and the idea of an acrostic is the first letter of each gemstone spells out something when you put them all together. Mm-hmm. So it was a way of sending a love message, and Napoleon had ordered several bracelets for Josephine with the date of their meeting. Josephine ordered them for her with her names of her children. He ordered them for his second bride, Marie-Louise, with the date of their wedding, etc. And the stones are quite complicated, but we picked a simple one so that we could all practice. This is a piece by Verdura. Verdura, of course, another jeweler to the stars, who actually worked with Paul Fleto. And here we have a contemporary piece, but it's really inspired by the audacity. Remember the Maltese cross bracelets that he did for Chanel. But here we started with a rather simple one, D for diamond, E, emerald, A, amethyst, R for ruby. So this one is quite evident, but we wanted to show you a more complex version. This is a love jewel a sentimental jewel from England of the 1830s and 40s, much more sumptuous. And first of all, the shape is a heart. So we already know the symbol of the heart. Mm-hmm. It is also a lock, a locket, a lock. So the idea is that only you have the key to my heart. And if we look carefully, it's beautifully worked gold with matted finish and polished grapes, etc. But let's look at the stones. We have a ruby, an emerald. This one is harder for you all to see. It's a garnet, an amethyst, a ruby, and a diamond. So, regard. So this one is dearest, regard. These are the types of words that are spelled with stones, the whole language of stones, which became extremely popular all through the 19th century and apparently is becoming a trend yet again.
Yes, yeah, and this idea of love messages is interesting because it's something just in between the people. Let's have a look at some elements from hidden love. On the right-hand side, you have an illustration of a ring with bats around. This presentation will also allow some secret love, sometimes forbidden at some point. We were in 1900. Lalique created this ring for homosexual gifts. It was a lesbian community. And we know that Liane de Pougy, a great courtesan who was very well known from many men, she actually fell in love with Natalie Clifford Barney, known as the Amazon, who was a very cultivated woman, American woman in Paris, and she would give this ring to her. She had beautiful, clear blue eyes, light blue eyes, that would fit very well, match very well with light stones, like blue stones, like this moonstone, which is right in the center. The bat will be also a symbol of homosexual community in Paris about 1900, but also of the lesbian community in particular. This one, we know all the information because from the Museum of Decorative Arts, this lalique element has all the provenance information. This is not the case of the other one. Well, from the Lalique Hakone Museum in Japan, Lalique here made a hairpin, but it was probably never worn by a woman, or if she wore it, she never knew the secret behind it. It was in a collection of a man, and the curator of the collection told us that there was a study of the dragonflies, and these two dragonflies were actually not one male and a female, but two male dragonflies. And if you look closer, you will see that the dragonfly at the bottom is biting the intimate part of the other dragonfly. So it looks like a sexual relation which is present in it, and proves some elements remain secret also, but could also reflect some specific messages. Let's move on to a very important type of forbidden love, and we're going to talk about lover's eye.
This is a particular type of jewel or piece that became very popular in the late 18th century. And if you look carefully, what do we have? We have an eye. We don't know who the eye belongs to. It's a gouache paint on ivory. There's a tear. And all around it you have pearls, which often are symbols of tears. So this piece is a way of showing feelings anonymously. We call it the lover's eye. It became a huge trend. And actually, there is a love story behind why this jewel became such a trend.
Absolutely.
We had this story of George. He was Prince of Wales to become, King George IV. He fell completely head over heels for Maria Fitzherbert, the pretty lady you see on the right. He saw her at the London Opera. He was only 21, and she was only 5 years older, but she had been widowed twice already. A little bit of bad luck.
Yes, indeed.
And he was so in love with her, he wanted to ask her to marry him, except for the fact she was widowed twice and she was Catholic, and he was underage, because King George III would have had to give his consent until the age of 25. So he's very dramatic. He stabs himself and tells her that he's done this and says, "Please marry me." And she agrees to marry him, but she escapes the next day to Europe, away from the British Isles. And she lets him cool off for a year. And then they start this beautiful relationship of love letters, etc. And finally, he sends her, he has his friend whose name was Causeway, a miniature painter. He sends her a miniature eye of his right eye. And he writes her saying, "I hope you haven't forgotten my feelings." And she does come back to England, and they get married secretly. And they do have a life together until his family finally forces him to marry a cousin, and they had to tell her that she had to stay out of his life. They remained in touch their entire lives, luckily. And when he became older and he was dying, he had written in his testament, he had given things to her, to Maria. He said, "To my true wife, my soul." And the moving part of the story is he was actually buried with her eye. She had offered him a lover's eye around his neck. So again, this story, secret story, these became all the rage in Britain and in France, and especially they came back again in style under Queen Victoria. These eyes, etc. It's kind of, when we look at it today, it's a little bit like surrealism or something, but they were very, very popular.
So how, concluding on such topic, this thematic of sentimental jewelry asks us the question, but why having them? Because they express feelings, they express emotions, they keep them secret, or they codify them so only the lovers can identify the message and understand it. But sometimes they also reflect the reality that love is not forever, because death could catch us. And this is one slide to talk about mourning jewelry, because that's the reality of some of the widows that would order some pieces. On the left-hand side, this is the top part of a ring that you will see. It's black, of course, because it's a symbol of mourning. And the snake biting its own tongue will reflect the circle of eternity. So it really empowers, in a way, this idea of love that should last forever. And the other one is a medallion, one of these typical lockets of mourning sentimental jewelry that were very successful, quite small if you see the size with the coin next to it. Pear is in it, but it represents weeping willow. So this idea that the woman is crying, the woman is weeping like the person is dead. He's not here, just the tomb is present with the urn. Is she the wife or a secret lover coming to him? We have no idea, but this is the idea of crying because the person passed away. And you have a message written, we part to meet again. So this idea that if death could separate them in the afterlife, they will be together. I should say happily ever after, or in sort of way. And this leads us to one of the key love stories we have mentioned, Romeo and Juliet again.
So we wanted to come full circle back to our star-crossed lovers. And on the left is a very important painting by Francesco Hayez, a Venetian painter who trained in Rome, and he also ended up teaching in Brera and near Milan. And this is one of his early works. It's called The Last Kiss of Romeo and Juliet. And the work caused quite a stir at the time, if you think of 1823. The way that Romeo is holding Juliet by the lower back, the way that she's caressing him and their faces are joining, it's extremely, believe it or not, because we've seen art that was a little more risque in earlier periods, but you know, the pendulum goes back and forth. So this piece had a huge impact on the imagination of the public, these star-crossed lovers leaving after their first embrace, etc. And so we wanted to actually bring you back to this collection.
Because, as you can see, on the right-hand side, this is a balcony clip. It's called balcone in Italian. And if you see it from the front, you do not see precisely what's going on. But if you see it from the back, and I'm going to point you the detail of it, you can see the lovers are hidden on the other side. And they're joining their hands they're going to kiss, as you can see. So that's also the message. Love expresses the sentiments, the emotions in a very complex way, in a very secret way, with lots of codes, lots of rules in a way, a very specific language, but which proves that with jewelry, it finds a great way to last forever. This was the last thing we said about this talk. Thank you very much for being with us tonight. That was a great choice to have you tonight. We say tonight, but today, depending on your time for sure. Before we finish, please note that if you want to see again this conversation, it will be posted very soon on YouTube, like all our conversations we do for the past one. Maybe you know them on the YouTube channel of L'École. If you want to have more information on the next online live conversations, here are the topics. By late January, we're going to talk about the art of Jean Vendôme. Jean Vendôme was a great jeweler of the second half of the 20th century. We are hosting a beautiful exhibition at L'École in Paris, but unfortunately it is not open to the public because of the context we all know. However, we hope to reopen it whenever it will be possible. And as most of us cannot travel, we thought it would be a great chance to share with you what's in the exhibition, what is the history of this very specific creator, and to know more at the time. By mid-February, you will have a mineralogy analysis of the key metal we all know for jewelry, gold, from the atom to the workshop. Then in March, we're going to analyze together two different arts, different, but together we are going to understand they share a common story, dance and jewelry. We call them dancing jewels. And to finish, by late March, early April, we're going to talk about another metal, platinum, but more on the aspect of the craftsmanship, of the technique and the history of it. So that will be the topics that you will have for the early 2021. Once again, Happy New Year. We hope you will enjoy the beginning of the year with all these topics. And now this is your time. If you had questions, maybe you pass them on to Inezita, who will send them to us. And if you have questions in mind, it is the time. We're going to select a few of them. And of course, for all the questions we had no time to answer, no worries, via the social media, we're going to answer them afterwards. So have a look at the questions.
Yes, we have a question. We have many questions,
Oh,
actually.
great.
Thank you very much for all of your questions. We have a question, when does the heart become a jewel?
This is a great
That's a
question.
difficult question.
Very. I think we do not have a precise date or key moment. We know that since the I would probably say late antiquity, early Middle Ages, we have some illustrations. We know that courtly love in the medieval time was very, very important. And the illustration, the mention of the heart in literature was very, very present. So this is probably the time when you can have some of the very first. But I remember seeing in some exhibitions about late ancient civilizations, some little shapes of heart, not an anatomical heart, but the shape we all know, which is the one from Valentine's Day, I would say, to be clear. And these jewels were something like 2nd or 3rd century of our common era. So it's something, yeah.
I think the heart comes and goes in antiquity, you can see. But the way that the heart is worn later on so openly, I think that's I would say, a purely modern.
Absolutely, yes, yes.
We have a question, what is the preferred gemstone for engagement rings other than the diamond?
Oh, that's a great question.
It is.
You want to answer?
Well, the diamond, of course, we think of the diamond as the gemstone for engagement rings since the 19th century with the discovery of the diamond mines in South Africa,
True.
Tiffany inventing the setting with the prongs, etc. A diamond is forever. But in the past, in France especially, I think sapphires were actually used.
Very
engagement
much.
rings, very much. Sapphires representing the sky, the virgin, purity. And so it's this idea of having just a diamond as an engagement ring. We actually have an entire course and a lecture on engagement rings, which we invite you when we do give it again. We didn't talk a lot about rings tonight intentionally, actually, because it's such a large topic.
It's a specific topic on itself that would deserve some very specific moments.
Do you have one that you like?
Okay, let me give you a second. Okay, so I can read lots of thank you very much. So this is great. Thank you so much.
I can answer one right now.
Yes,
The
go ahead.
artist. Sorry, thank you for the easy question. It's the artist of the emblems. The emblems, there were many versions of these emblems of Cupid. I mentioned the one by Otto van Veen. He was Flemish Dutch in 1608. Van Veen, I think, is V-A-N, and the second word is V-E-E-N. And it's Amoratum Emblemata. There were also versions in French by a gentleman named de la Feuille. And I think Anitita will be helping you to spell that in the chat, hopefully. And also Richard Ayers in England. So you see this idea, we chose actually Van Veen because it was one of the earliest examples and best known. But there were many emblem books of Cupid's mischief.
True. I can see some of the questions, like in particular, I don't see many men wearing hearts. There was a question related to the symbol of the heart we've been mentioning. True, it's not something very common worn by men. It was attached to more feminine jewelry in a way. This is why I indicated formally that these anatomical hearts were some of the proposals of the jewels that exists in the world that few men would wear. It's a topic on itself, men's jewelry that we did in the past, and we all know that there are few pieces today for men that there are for women, but historically men wore a lot of jewelry, and when it's coming back, because it comes back a lot, and hopefully I would say as men we like to wear jewelry and to have more proposals of piece of jewelry to wear, a few hearts are present in some of the collection that exists. But the anatomical one I was mentioning.
We have a question about the panda.
Oh, indeed. Oh, yes, indeed.
The panda that I'm wearing.
Well, okay, so
And
we're very lucky to be here in the Van Cleef & Arpels Vendôme Salon, and the director of the salon allowed us to wear beautiful Lucky Animals brooches. So I'm wearing a little dog, as you can see in it, which is so cute. That's why I just wanted to wear it tonight, and you actually wear a little panda right there. So they're part of Van Cleef pieces, of course, just for the info, not relative to the sentiment, but just enjoying wearing them. This is why we have them. Thanks for asking.
I have an easy one. Can I answer the easy one?
Please go ahead.
What was the name of the former Columbia medical student that created the heart? It was Paul Flatto. Paul Flatto. I hope I didn't get that wrong. I know he did Columbia. He started, I remembered that it was medical school, but he didn't stay long because he was enticed by the whole world of, let's say, the Cafe Society of New York, and he was a creative being, and so he started to design jewelry. In fact, he was across from Harry Winston, and at the time, Harry Winston was a supplier of diamonds. He wasn't a retailer, so he was very early in on the game. Very interesting man who lived to be 90 years old, by the way. He had to go to Mexico for political reasons, came back. And Paul Fletto was interesting because he had a real sense of humor, as you saw. And one time he went to a party and he had forgotten cufflinks, so he wore a nuts and bolts as his cufflinks. And people kept complimenting him. So what did he do? He made a gold version, which became one of his signature jewels.
I think we're reaching the end of our talk. No worries. For all the more questions, we're going to answer them via the social media. Thank you very much once again. It was a pleasure to be with you today or tonight, depending on the time you're watching us. Thank you, and looking forward to having you for the next evening conversations. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everybody. Goodbye. See you next time.